Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the 20-minute masterclass in keeping educational facilities healthy and safe. My name is Tori Stashew, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. After the presentation, we'll open up the floor to questions, so please use the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen to send in all your questions. Just be sure to send them to me or to all panelists so we don't miss it. We'd like to thank the Ontario Education Collaborative Marketplace, OECM, for partnering with us for today's session. The OECM is a trusted, not-for-profit collaborative sourcing partner for Ontario's education sector, broader public sector, and other not-for-profit organizations. Bunzl is an awarded supplier under the OECM's custodial agreement. I'd now like to introduce David Smith, our cleaning, hygiene, and sanitation expert at Bunzl Canada, who will present today's session. Over to you, David.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Tori. Just excited to talk and share the learnings we've found while people have been dealing with the new norm and going back to school. So we thought it'd be a good time to share some of the things that we've found out in the last number of months here. So we're going to look at infection diseases and how they spread. And this is essentially from a pathogen standpoint, what we can do to protect ourselves. So a pathogen is a bacterium or virus or other microorganism that will cause disease, and it can be transmitted from person to person. So contact may come as a result of direct or indirect contact. It can involve something like a handshake. It could also involve sharing something like a cup, and then ultimately the things that we touch. So a doorknob and those high touch points are something. And also it's the same way that the flu and the common cold and things like MSRA get transmitted as well too. Another piece of this, how they spread, is certainly droplets, and this is the real concern around people wearing masks while we're trying to control that. Droplets are generated from a source person. Primarily, they might cough or sneeze or talking. And once that organism lands on a surface, it may be transmitted through one of the various contact routes. So that's obviously, it's key that we try to control that. Airborne, coughing and sneezing, and again, applies to the measles, tuberculosis, and the flu and the common cold. So that's something that people are more and more concerned with as this has gone on, is the air changes and ultimately how we can be affected by that. And then one of the other vehicles is that it can be something that can be contaminated, like food, like blood, like water on instruments, and where we get into a situation where we're potentially reusing things through clinical procedures or sharing. So a great concern there. And then, as I say, the last common sort of way that can happen is through a vector. So through animals, quite like mosquitoes, fleas, things of that can transmit microorganisms from one to another. And the most common one we deal with here in North America would be West Nile. Okay, so another big part of this is that pathogens basically will grow exponentially, and they can double in number every 15 minutes or so. So a single pathogen can grow to a huge size in a very short period of time. So the number quoted here is 2 million in 7 hours. Some of the other important things that we've been sort of looking at is what it looks like on surfaces. So pathogens need 4 elements to multiply. They need a food source, they need moisture, and time and temperature. And here's some examples of how long things can live up on a surface. Hepatitis is a great concern these days, and up to 4 days. E. coli, 1.5 hours to many days. Norovirus, which is a common one that we deal with quite often in long-term care in areas like that, can last days to weeks and is very difficult to control. Cold and viruses up to 24 hours on a surface. Flu, which is of a great concern this year. Talking to my colleagues in Australia, they've just been through the batch of flu that we're going to get, and we need to be prepared for that. In many ways, that may be more of a challenge than coronavirus as we come through the flu season. C. difficile, it can live up to 5 months on a surface, and we see that, of course, in our acute hospitals and environments like that, and it's very challenging. But we do have some new technologies which are proving very effective on it. And then MSRA, which is something we see in the athletics area, professional sports, college, university sports, things of that nature, and it can live up to 90 days on a surface. So they all can prove challenging in their own right to deal with. So what about some of the new emerging pathogens, which is really what we've been dealing with and focused on for the better portion of the year? And really it's the emerging, or what they're referring to as a novel respiratory pathogen. So the newly identified pathogen, these can cause acute respiratory infections that are very challenging to treat, very similar to the circumstances around SARS. They can be easily and spread easily and rapidly, so they cause a critical health concern, and we all have to be on our guard and have really good personal hygiene practices. I can't stress that enough. And the biggest challenging certainly is to make sure that we're washing our hands constantly, as we have a habit of touching our face and things throughout the day. So the personal hygiene practices are very critical. There are, who's most at risk? Well, unfortunately, we've seen some of the tragedy here the last number of months. The elderly are at severe risk, and as they get into, if the COVID gets into long-term care, it can have devastating effects. And then as well, the very young. Although more recently, some studies, and as the information shows up, it's shown that a lot of people are at risk no matter what the age. So something to be very wary of. And again, we've been trying to implement good practices, and they require some special strategies in an attempt for us to try to control them. So, and again, proper prevention in the school in terms of the cleaning and the personal hygiene of everybody in the environment is critical to controlling it. And I think largely, I don't want to sort of comment on the political climate, but I think people have been doing a good job, and they've been switched on in those environments. So that's a very good thing. So let's look at how long COVID lives on surfaces, and because that's an area of concern for us. And depending on the environment, the virus is detectable up to 4 hours on copper, which usually is resistant, as I say, to a certain amount of bacteria, up to 24 hours on cardboard, which can be a concern as things are coming in, 2 to 3 days on plastic and stainless steel, and then it can also be suspended in the air in the form of a droplet. And that's what we were touching on earlier, and thus the need to try to wear facial protection to contain those. So according to current evidence, COVID is primarily transmitted between people through respiratory droplets and the contact routes, including generally when you would cough or sneeze, right? Prolonged personal contact, such as touching or shaking hands. So thus the need to keep the 2 meter distance, or in some cases even more. But you really have to maintain that social distance. That's critical. And then touching something with the virus on it, and then touching our face and our eyes, our nose, our mouth before washing our hands. And it's really quite human nature to do that, and you really have to stop yourself and make sure that you go and spend the critical time on washing your hands. And when you can't wash your hands, hand sanitizer is good to augment, but really washing hands is the critical piece. So let's look at what we can do to prevent outbreaks within our schools and our educational facilities. So largely what's been implemented is a group of universal precautions. So, and this is the one I really like, and I've tried to live my days like this, but if you assume that everybody is potentially infectious or that you have it per se, then you are more likely to be cognizant of these precautions and maintain the barriers that need to be maintained. So we've talked about hand washing, it's critical. And barriers as far as any protective equipment that may be required in an environment, and the key thing, wearing an appropriate mask. And the good news is a lot of these type of things have become more readily available as we've adapted to the new norm, and so we're getting supplies now, which is a positive thing for everybody. And the biggest thing, aside from the hand washings, we can do is doing proper cleaning and disinfecting. And there's critical parts to that we're going to touch on, but it's important to do that. And I've sort of adopted this, that preventing an outbreak is better than trying to contain one. So we've taken a very proactive response in education with our programs, doing high touch surfaces 2 to 3 times a day as time permits, and then augmenting with additional technologies like electrostatics, and it has proved very effective where people are taking a preventative approach, and which is a very positive thing to see. And now, of course, a lot of those same things are implemented in the healthcare side of things, especially with long-term care. So let's talk a little bit about choosing the right products and choosing the right disinfectant. Can't stress this enough. There is an approved list on the Health Canada website that also ties to the EPA website in the United States that shows all the COVID approved disinfectants, and all these disinfectants would have a DIN number, a drug identification number, which is issued by Health Canada, and have a kill claim tied to it. And so it's really important that if you're using a frontline disinfectant to do touch point cleaning, that they have that criteria, that they are DIN approved, Health Canada approved, they have a number. And it's also important you dig a little deeper. You need to know what kill claims they have, and because I would tell you there's some misinformation out there, and you want to be cautious. Make sure you have good information because you need to know what, in fact, it will kill. And aside from that, other than COVID, quite frankly, but the other key piece of information is there is the dwell time, or the contact time required. So we're going to touch on that here a little bit later. But as I say, that list is up there on the Health Canada site, and you can go, and that's a good starting point if you're looking for disinfectant. But please remember to dig a little deeper and make sure that you have all the information you need to properly use it and effectively use it. So there are different forms of disinfectants out there, of course, available. Some have been challenging in the supply chain to get, and some have not, but usually there's dilutable solutions. There's ready to use, which have a tendency to be the products that are more in demand because they usually have a quicker dwell time as well, 1 to 2 minutes. There's also some aerosol forms, but very rarely do you see that because we don't want to put disinfectants airborne as a rule. There are some tablet forms of disinfection available too, and then a lot of common, which is in demand, is the wipes. And so there's both quat-based wipes and hydrogen peroxide-based wipes that are in demand and are very effective because when we get these tools into the hands of everybody has a responsibility in this to help and clean their own personal workspace and areas, in addition to all the good work that's being done by our custodians and as well any environmental people. But we all have a role to play in this. So selecting a disinfectant that's safe for your facility, that won't necessarily harm surfaces in your facility, because some do have corrosive tendencies and can be an issue if they were used over a period of time incorrectly. And then again, any other required safe handling instructions that you might need to do that. But that sort of covers disinfection. Along with that, the next piece of it is really choosing the right tools to apply and use the material. I can't stress this enough. Microfiber cloths have a great value in that they aid in the mechanical cleaning of a surface, and they will, with the nature of their fibers, will help you to aggressively clean a surface with your touch point disinfectant that you're using. And again, if you effectively fold them, they have up to 8 planes or 8 sides, if you will, that they can be used to trap the biofilm and the dirt into the cloth. And laundering is a key part of this as well too. I like it for the fact that you're moving that biofilm, you're taking it from your facility, and then in turn you're washing it, removing it, and so they can be used effectively. And again, it's important to follow the washing and laundry guidelines with microfiber to effectively get a good life out of them. Most standard ones that are out there in the marketplace can withstand about 400 washings. We do have ones that are up over 1,000 washings that can be used for healthcare and other environments, but it's a great tool. We've done all kinds of studies and work with the traditional cotton rags and terry towels and things, and shows clearly that it's not the best tool. It's not effective on a lot of those surfaces. It ends up being spreading more bacteria around than it is helping to collect. Another big part of this process in terms of the product is making sure we have the right PPE on hand. It's been a challenge for many people. Providing disposable gloves to help keep your team's healthy and safe. Tori or Stephanie, can you just advance the next slide, please? And one thing here added to is color coding. Okay, so choosing the right PPE. We want to use single-use gloves. We want to store securely away, right, from the potential of being contaminated, but readily available for everybody to use as necessary. And it's a good practice or best practice to make sure the gloves dispense one at a time to prevent contamination. You don't want to pull a bunch of gloves out, touch them, and then put them back into the Kleenex style dispensing box. That's not a good practice. So make sure that they do that. And then it's also important to provide a variety of gloves that fit. And I want to add this. This has been a real challenging area for us, meaning the industry. Gloves have been in a very short supply. So it's very important to work with your suppliers to see what they have available and to make sure that we can continue to provide gloves and protection. Another big piece of this: never reuse gloves, and that's a critical piece. There have been some horror stories out recently where some manufacturers were caught, not in our country, but trying to repackage used gloves. So, as I say, make sure you're getting it from a reputable source, and they can be readily made available when you need them. As part of this whole process, we need to make sure we're doing best practices, and we've developed some good protocols here in applying all this material. So it's really important to reinforce that disinfection, depending on where you're from and the sector you're from, it's a 2 or 3 step process. It's not just taking product and wiping an area down and walking away. The first portion of this is to clean, and it's to remove that visible soil and dirt, debris, biofilm, and that is the first step. And if we're just only doing that, we would be, by Canadian definition, sanitizing, provided we got enough contact time for that particular disinfectant. and we need to be doing true disinfection on all these touch points daily. So the first part of this is the cleaning portion of it, and again, the term sanitizing applies there as well too. It also applies in the food service areas, and you need to as well have an appropriate food service approved, Health Canada approved product if you're into those food preparation areas. It's come up a couple of times today in my world with some outbreaks in commercial kitchens in some of the federal institutions. So it's something you really have to be ready to deal with too. That's been a challenge. And then the second part of true disinfection after we've done the cleaning is to actually reapply the disinfectant again and give it the appropriate dwell or contact time to work on the surface, to work on that clean surface that we've cleaned. So that's what's going to eliminate the pathogens and the bacteria and the viruses. And again, we're focused on doing those high touch areas all the time. So let's look at some of the common touch points that we would see in our educational spaces. So obviously, a lot of these are very straightforward. Telephones, restrooms, where we have a tendency to touch things, although a lot of the restrooms are moving towards things that reduce the need to touch them and automated, which is a great thing. Desks and tables, especially where the students are residing, and in some cases eating their lunch and doing a number of things all from that space. The railings and the touch points within a facility, that could be going up a set of stairs, that could be going in a hallway, it can be a number of things. The computer boards and keyboards are an area of concern. I know with our electrostatics, we do areas like Queen's University, their computer areas every day very effectively with the electrostatics. So we've been able to deal with that. And of course, door handles, light switches, things of that. And then a lot of the schools have a locker, or a cubby system set up for clothing and things, for the winter apparel and whatnot. And so we need to make sure we're spending the time in those areas, because that's the high touch points. And really, quite frankly, from our studies, the challenge is, kindergarten to grade 3. That's the biggest area where we really have to focus a lot in the elementary environments. It's not to say we don't have it in other areas, but that's really where we have to focus on these touch points to help control it. So let's look at some of the areas in restrooms that we want to focus on. So obviously the toilets, the urinals, sinks and taps, door handles, again, soap dispensers. And again, the one pictured there is a no-touch dispenser, which is effective, but it still needs to be cleaned and disinfected with a frontline disinfectant. Counters, trash containers, anything that people touch. And it's critical that we're doing those on a frequent basis. I'm not here to tell you how many times you're going to do it within your facility, but a lot of people during this time have tried to do it at a bare minimum of every 4 hours. If they have more resources available, then they're doing it more than that. But it's critical, and it's critical that we use that DIN-approved disinfectant, frontline disinfectant, and we know how much time we need to keep the surface damp or wet. That's critical. And this takes us to the next page. Using disinfectants correctly. I see we have a spray bottle pictured here as part of our images. I have to comment, it's been a great concern of mine since this whole thing started. You walk into environments and people have a spray bottle full of disinfectant, and they're atomizing in the air, in the area to clean and disinfect their workspace. It may be in retail, it may be somewhere. I can't emphasize that enough, that you need to put that disinfectant on straight stream and spray it directly into your cloth. It's going to cause respiratory distress if people just start spraying in the air. And so, unfortunately, I think a lot of cases they've given them disinfectant and they've told them to go to treat their area without any proper training or education. So if you see that in a professional circle, it's very important that we help people protect themselves and protect the rest of the public that come in. You don't want to breathe disinfectant in all day if you're multiply treating an area 15 or 20 times. It's a very big concern for us. Again, it's important that we use the whole process here. We need to clean the surface first of that biofilm, that visible soil. Again, we have to allow for the proper dwell time or contact time on the surface, a match with the disinfectant that we have. And again, another piece of it, depending on the format, you want to make sure you've got the right dilution rate. I can't tell you enough times where we've gone into facilities and people think that they're cleaning and disinfecting at the right rate, only to find out that the rate they're using it at is not sufficient to do the job. So, and again, make sure you protect yourself when you're using these disinfectants. The next, people are augmenting with other forms of a disinfection, in addition to the mechanical cleaning and the second step. And a lot of it is being done with electrostatics. Some people have elected to try to use foggers and things of that nature, but by far, electrostatics are the most effective tool in this area and doing large areas. And again, we've been conducting a number of studies and working with these programs for almost 8 years now. So this just wasn't a result of COVID. It's been very effective, and you can do areas much faster with much less chemistry, which is a great story. And again, we can cover anywhere from 18 to 22,000 square feet per hour. So you can do a whole school in a few hours, which is very effective and very efficient. So if you're interested in more information on that, please reach out. We have a whole a bevy of information and things that we've been able to put together and learn about electrostatics. So the other big piece of this is training our cleaning teams and making sure, not only have the right products and the right tools, but they know how to use them. We sort of touched on that a little bit. People are a critical part of the program. They're the most critical. So we need to focus on the details and make sure that they have the information they need to do, number one, to do the job correctly and safely, but number two, to protect themselves. So this is just a little synopsis on how to properly put on and ultimately the next slide, to remove disposable gloves. It's critical. I can't say it enough. I go into environments every day and we see it. And I've seen people do some things that make me shudder in taking gloves off. So it's important to spend some time with your staff to make sure they understand that. Number two is how to, because we're dealing with masks and picking the right mask that's for the environment that they're in, getting that, but as well, the hand hygiene piece that goes with it, whether they're washing their hands prior to putting them on or to using alcohol-based hand sanitizer, it becomes very important. And wearing the mask appropriately. Again, can't stress that enough. It doesn't do any good if your nose is exposed or you've got it down around under your chin. You really need to be cognizant. And again, I talk, and if you act like you're infected, you're going to be switched on, and you're going to make sure that you're wearing your mask and your appropriate PPE correctly, and you're going to be protecting everybody that's in contact with you. One of the big pieces here now as we move forward in the new norm is we need to verify and validate that in fact all this work is being done and done to standard. So we have some very interesting technology that we've been working with our Wanda Next and Wanda Mobile digital cleaning platforms. So we have a number of ways that we can validate that the surfaces were cleaned to a standard, and we can record that and make sure that your compliance is where you need it to be. And it also allows us to track various things and pieces of information that are very powerful that would allow us to train people and educate them and use it as a great training tool. So highly effective. If you have any interest in those type of things, please connect with us. And we've been able to build some custom programs for both education and for healthcare as well too. And again, part of what we're doing today and the next step is the communication piece. and it's important that it's ongoing and constant. You know, the biggest thing we talk about, again, going back to the first of this presentation, is proper hand hygiene. Can't stress it enough. The more, this is a statement from some studies that have come out. More than 95% of the people wash their hands incorrectly, which is a pretty scary thing, right? Not using enough soap, more often than not washing for long enough. So if you travel at all, you'll go into airports and things of this nature, and there are certain places that music will come on when you're playing or when you're washing your hands, and the whole thing is tied to making sure you continue to wash your hands appropriately until that music's over. The point is, it's all geared to making sure people spend enough time and they're thorough. And then there are other people that choose not to wash, and you know, we've witnessed that. You know, if you go into one of the service centers and you can get, it can be pretty scary in some of the washrooms in those environments. You don't necessarily see the best hand hygiene practices. So I can't stress this enough. It's a critical part, and for us, we have to do it every day, multiple times. And again, part of this as well is if you do cough or sneeze, hopefully you've got a mask on, but still, as a reflex, you know, you should be doing it into your sleeve or into your elbow, as I call it, from the healthcare side of things, and make sure that if you do have something that needs to be disposed of, that it goes in an appropriate area. Can't stress enough. I walk out every day and you see gloves and masks discarded on the ground. That's, you know, please people, stress to them to make sure that they dispose of these things, because someone has to deal with that, right? It's one of the people in the environmental or the custodial side. And again, we have a great Bunzl hand hygiene program guide that we put together, and it's downloadable. And I think it's going to go out with Tori and at the end of the session on a mail out. So it's on site and it's a great tool to use. So with that, I'm going to conclude our presentation, but I want to open the floor to questions if somebody has any questions.
That was great. Thank you so much, David. We'll now open the floor for our Q&A session. As a reminder, please use the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen to type in your questions. Just be sure to send them to me, Tori, or all panelists. And we will just jump into the questions here. So the first one is, what is the required dwell contact time for disinfectants?
Great question. Again, it will depend on the particular disinfectant that you've chosen. There's essentially three categories that seems to come up most commonly. You have disinfectants that traditionally, going back a number of years, a lot of them were geared to 10-minute contact or dwell time. So again, they were quite common going back into the 80s and 90s. As we progressed, disinfectant dwell time is shortened. So there's quite a number of disinfectants in the 5-minute contact time that is critical and we can use effectively. And then more recently, in the last number of years, the marketplace has moved to disinfectants that will work in 1 or 2 minutes, because it's much more feasible for us to keep a surface wet for that time. It's the longer the dwell time, the more challenging it is to get effective kill. So that information is all on the technical information or with the kill claims that are provided by Health Canada. And as I say, once you get that information, keep digging until you get the critical piece. It'll tell you the kill claims and it will tell you the appropriate dwell time. Health Canada does a little differently than EPA, but that information is all there.
Great, thanks so much, David. Our next question is, are there higher risks in using vinyl gloves over nitrile gloves?
I'm not a glove aficionado by any stretch of the imagination. I think the important thing is to wear gloves And I know many people that wear vinyl, and I know a number of people in healthcare and acute environments that wear nitrile, which is heavily in demand right now. And I would also, say, because we've been working with OECM on this, gloves are in short supply. So we're trying to keep everybody going on gloves and get the appropriate sizes. But, either or is fine. In my space, I think it's just important to wear a disposable glove when you're doing this type of cleaning that we're talking about.
Super. And the next question ties into what you had just answered. And is there a type of glove that should be used when working with disinfectants, vinyl, nitrile, or rubber?
Well, I mean, all are suitable. All are suitable. I think it's fair to say that the one that provides a good amount of protection is a nitrile glove. But again, what is readily available that fits, that will protect, and ideal, it has to be a disposable. That we don't want to get into such situation where we're reusing household gloves or the former sort of Playtex style of glove, and I'm not to give it a brand, but that your mother used to wash the dishes. It's important that it's a disposable glove, and that after you've completed the tasks at hand, that you remove them properly and then you wash your hands.
Super. The next question is sanitizing alone effective against COVID?
It's an effective tool to augment your hand hygiene program. I think you heard me mention a number of times, nothing replaces hand washings. I think it's sometimes we get too reliant on hand sanitizer. I don't want to say that we're lazy, but we're very busy. So it's easier just to use a hand sanitizer than to go wash your hands. But I can't stress enough, critically, you need to wash your hands as many times as you can. I've been out in some schools talking to some people. You'll find people that are washing their hands 10 to 15 times a day. You'll find people that are washing their hands 25 times a day. It's important that you use enough soap, usually mild soap, because otherwise it would be quite harsh to wash your hands that number of times during a day. But spend the appropriate time you need to effectively use it. And then when you don't have it, when it's not available, it's fine to go to the hand sanitizer.
Great, thanks, David. The next two questions relate to products and safety in schools. So the first one is, are there any cleaning and disinfecting products that shouldn't be used in K to 12 schools?
Well, in terms of disinfectant, I think the guideline still is you go back to what Health Canada and the EPA are suggesting we're using, that is effective on COVID, but effective as well on all the other things that we're facing, including influenza, as we enter going to be a very aggressive flu season, and they're the key things. They're the guideline by which they'll tell us that we can safely and effectively use it, and again, to do the digging with the proper information to make sure that it's been approved, to make sure what its killed claims say. And because, as I say, I have in this time dug into material, and I don't want to get into specifics, but I've found disinfectants, and people, quite frankly, have been led to believe that they're doing one thing, and in fact they're doing something entirely different. So it's go to that source for the disinfectant. It's important that they meet that criteria. Any of the reputable suppliers will have an DIN approved disinfectant, most likely with a couple of different dwell times that you can choose from, and make sure it's the right one that's going to help to protect your environment.
Super, thanks, David. And then the next question, are all sanitizers safe for children to use?
No, there's some, there've been recently, there was some certain hand sanitizers that got out on the marketplace that had some health concerns which they did not have the proper USP ingredients to make sure they were safe for everybody, and as well potentially for somebody that might be pregnant. And there was a number of areas concerns. So thankfully, the government has been quick to look at some of those areas, and a number of them have been actually recalled recently. So again, I think it's important when you make a choice that you're dealing with a reputable supplier that can provide you with the material. Ideally, the best products are 70% isopropyl alcohol, and they come from one of the major brand dealers that are and seem to be able to provide it now and effectively. But you wanted to stay away from that other material, as I say, it caused some concerns in some young people, and as I say, women that would be pregnant.
Super. The next question is in regards to masks. What type of masks are recommended for better protection against COVID?
Well, masks are, it's been a great dilemma because masks have been in short supply. Now it's starting to get better. Of course, everybody sort of defaulted to tried to default to the very high end of the scale, where they would have a NIOSH approved N95 mask. And then there's different registrations levels 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s that are available now, and looped end masks and different things for the environment. In fact, I saw a memo this morning where there's 4 different types of N95s that are approved that are going to be available. Really, it comes down to what the task is you're doing and the environment that you're in, and what can readily be made available. We personally have been in a good position because of the fact we own a company called McCordick, and we're able to provide masks in various types for people to places like correctional services and people like that need them in a great amount. And the same with education. The province has dictated some things that they want with regards to the students. So we've been able to help out, and recently we've actually made some donations of some masks to various organizations. So that's what I would say on masks.
Great. The next question is about frequency and cleaning. How many times a day should cleaning and disinfecting be done in K-12 schools? And as well, should bathrooms be cleaned more frequently?
Well, ideally, yes, they should be cleaned more frequently. And that's where some of our washroom monitoring tools are proving very effective, because they'll indicate how many visitors we may have had into a washroom, which sometimes can be a key indicator as to the fact that it needs to be cleaned. But the reality is, with time and energy and the allotment of people and personnel to do this kind of work, what we're trying to do is at least a bare minimum of every 4 hours. And in the case of some facilities, some of the major players are cleaning washrooms on an hourly basis, or inspecting them, if you will, to make sure. But again, we can't always see what we're dealing with, so it becomes important to do that core disinfection, that high touch disinfection on the surfaces that people touch.
Great, thanks, David. We just have a couple more questions here. So the next one is, when would you use a sanitizing spray instead of a disinfectant?
Well, in a lot of cases, it's the same product. It's just tied to the appropriate dwell time to effectively deal with it. So as an example, one of our frontline 1 minute kill accelerated hydrogen peroxide disinfectants, it will disinfect in 1 minute, but the same product will sanitize in 30 seconds. And what the difference being that the sanitizing is getting you a 3 or a 4 log reduction. So 99.999% of the bacteria would be killed on the surface by wiping it on and mechanically cleaning it. But if we want to attain that 100% mark, we need to do the first step and make sure we get the appropriate dwell time. Then after the surface has been cleaned, we need to do the second step and reapply the disinfectant. But really, a lot of times it's the same product. It's just the protocol and the procedure that you're using it in. So that's critical to understand the differences between the two.
Super. And when would you use a quat versus another disinfectant?
Well, there are a host of disinfectants out on the marketplace. Quaternary ammonia compounds are quite common, and really the key thing, there are quats that will kill in 2 minutes. There are quats that'll kill in 10 minutes, and some in the middle between. So it's critical to know that what you're buying, and how to effectively use it as a tool. You can get the same thing with, in some cases, with accelerated hydrogen peroxides and the hydrogen peroxide-based materials too. They range in effectiveness. Some will do things in a minute. Others are formulated to do it in 10 minutes. So again, it's important to sort of drill down to that key information to make sure you're using what is necessary. I can tell you in the last month, I visited a couple of facilities where the people thought that, quite frankly, they had a fast-acting disinfectant, and when we dug into the information, in fact, it was a 10-minute dwell time. So, and they weren't keeping the surfaces obviously wet for 10 minutes. So it's a challenge. So you really need to know what you're using and how effectively you're going to use it.
Super. In terms of cloths, are cotton cloths more effective for cleaning, or is microfiber preferred?
I touched on this in there. Microfiber in my space is ideal. It's important that microfiber is laundered effectively, and so it can be used. There's things that you don't want to do with microfiber. You don't want to introduce bleach to it. You don't want to dry them at high temperatures or use fabric softener. So there are things that would negate the effectiveness of a microfiber, but it's by far that, or a disposable wipe with an aggressive surface are by far the best tools to clean and do with the biofilm. And then in the case of microfiber, of course, we can reuse it if we launder it and effectively clean it.
Great, thank you. The next two questions are in terms of electrostatic disinfecting. So can the electrostatic machine be used on fabric?
Yes, very effective on soft surfaces, although most of them do not have sanitizing claim, which is all we could achieve on a soft surface. We've been doing some studies and some work very effectively with stuff in the military and with firemen's bunker gear and dealing with fabrics where we're getting sanitizing claims by using an electrostatic, our Clorox T360 on those surfaces. So proving highly effective. I know the CBSA used them at CFP Trenton to deal with all their fabrics and soft surfaces when they were repatriating the planes, and it became a highly effective tool.
Super. You also mentioned that aerosols are not recommended for trigger sprayers, but are they okay for electrostatic disinfecting?
Well, no, you would not be using any kind of trigger sprayer on electrostatic. You have the vehicle and the equipment that delivers it. It's really, electrostatics are delivery systems, and the key thing about that is to make sure you have the appropriate droplet size, again, matched with the right chemistry, right? We don't want to, if we're applying electrostatics to say damp on a surface for 2 or 3 minutes, we don't want to put a 10-minute dwell time disinfectant in there. It also has to be an approved electrostatic chemistry. I got to caution people. There are people out there putting things in electrostatics, and they're putting themselves at risk. So you need to make sure that Health Canada has validated it as an electrostatic chemistry, because that's also tied to when you can get back into a space and the amount of time that you might need to stay out of a space. With our Clorox technology, we're able to re-enter a space immediately after application, which means ultimately no downtime. And that's the reason we stay away from foggers and things of that nature.
Super. And our last question is, do you need to have the Wanda Wall system in order to use the app?
I- My understanding is no, that you don't. There are several variations of it that we can use in conjunction with whatever phone systems and things are available. And we have some really terrific people, including yourself, that are working with that technology for us. And so really, it's about sitting down, having a discussion about what you would like to try to measure, and then we could come up with a solution that makes the most sense economically and efficiently for you.
Absolutely. Well, that concludes our Q&A portion. We would like to thank you all for attending today, and thank you to our OECM partners for joining us for this 20-minute masterclass. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to David or myself, and we would be happy to assist. Following this webinar, we will be sending out a recording as well as our hand hygiene guide.